All right, welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturdivant. James is here in for Carlene. Let's talk about a story we had as a top headline at the top of the show. So a Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department officer who died by suicide in July may be the first known officer in the United States to have suffered from CTE. Now, this is according to a report from the New York Times. We posted this on our website and our digital platforms over the weekend. Brent Simpson, a K-9 officer, took his own life on July 1st, and his widow learned about CTE, his diagnosis, earlier this year. She told that to the New York Times. So if this is confirmed, Simpson would be the first known police officer in the nation to suffer from a disease that we often associate with football, with boxing. I've seen soccer. I do want to point out, an article does lay out that police officers face numerous occupational hazards that could cause and contribute to brain trauma. So I just want to point that out. But here on the show, because I feel like there's still a lot of questions surrounding what CTE is, we have a woman who is an award-winning, nationally certified medical speech language pathologist and certified brain injury specialist with over a decade of experience in adult and geriatric care. She currently serves as the assistant clinical professor at Northeastern University. Dr. Kelli Uitenham. How did I do with the last name? Uitenham.
You did really well.
Thank you. And thank you for your time. Thank you for stopping by the studio. I think a lot of people would acknowledge that we first heard about CTE almost a decade ago, over a decade ago.
It was discovered in 2002 by Dr. Amalu.
Yeah, in
Yes.
the movie, the Will Smith movie kind of
Yes.
lays it out.
Yes.
I'm sure Hollywood made its own liberties of what to include and what to exclude. But what, for those who are unfamiliar, maybe have heard of it, but just are not exactly sure, what is CTE?
Good question. So CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and it is a neurodegenerative condition in the brain. And essentially, when you are subjected to repeated head injuries, much like can happen in the line of duty of being a police officer, a lot of times we think football and those repetitive hits to the head. And when that happens, those repetitive hits, or you are repeatedly getting concussed, it I won't get too nerdy on you, but
No, go ahead. You have we have the time, we have the runway.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So there are things within our brain called the tau protein, TAU, and essentially what happens is that protein misfolds and it becomes unusable, and that kind of creates a chain reaction in the brain, and that causes the cells around the brain to die, unfortunately. And so when you think about the different parts of the brain, so going around the brain, just the exterior, I always say that the brain is our motherboard. It controls everything. But if you consider the front part of your brain, that is your frontal lobe that deals with your problem solving, your impulsive control, your emotions, some memory. On the left and right side, you have your temporal lobes that transitions your short-term memory into long-term memory. It also houses your language center. In the back of your head, you have your occipital lobe, and that controls your vision. So a lot of times you'll hear athletes or people who may be concussed complain of blurry vision or having a tough time seeing double. And so when all of those parts are affected, I mean, you think about your personality, what makes you you, how you respond if someone angers you. All of those things, if they start to die because of CTE, then a lot of times what I hear in my practice and when I'm interviewing people or giving talks across the country is they're just not acting like themselves. This isn't like them. This is not how they act. And if you consider your brain the motherboard who makes you who you are, if parts of your brain are starting to die, then no, you are not going to show up like yourself. And so that is a common phrase that people will say to me when I give my talks.
It's similar to dementia.
Not
Okay.
So there are.
That's what.
Yes, it can be related
Okay.
to. So there are 4 stages of CTE. By the time you reach stage 4, you are in the stage where you're presenting like you have dementia.
Oh, so that's like a later stage. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
much later symptom, but you will start to see signs very early, having to do with memory, word finding. So if someone is saying, like, can you pass me that whatchamacallit, see if they can find out what that word is. Because if they can't, then that is a sign that they are experiencing symptoms and they should be referred to a specialist like myself. So a lot of times people will hear speech language pathologists and they're like, oh, you help baby say rabbit instead of wabbit. And yes, we do. A lot of those are pediatric or school-based speech language pathologists, and they do a great deal of work. Medical speech language pathologists like myself, we deal with the adult population and more medical cases. So there are a lot more medical SLPs who are doing work in the realm of concussion and traumatic brain injury to help rehab. A lot of times even doctors, unfortunately, don't know the full scope of what speech therapists do. And so that's why it's important that I raise awareness like I do through my nonprofit, so that people understand that speech therapists, we can help to slow things like dementia. We can also help to rehab the cognitive deficits that show up in people who are concussed or who have repeated traumatic brain injuries.
I do want to get to your nonprofit in just a moment, but what do you tell parents, what do you tell adults about sports, about occupations that have to, or there's a risk of head trauma? I mean, look, we just had first weekend of NFL football. We all got excited about it, but we don't think about the risk. And also there are openings. We talk about a shortage of law enforcement officers. People want to be a law enforcement officer, go into the military, another occupational hazard. What do you tell those folks? Do you advise them in some sort of way?
That's a really good question. It's also very tough because this world, this country loves its sports, especially its football. We have a huge respect for the police. My stepfather, he was a police officer. He died in the line of duty, unfortunately. So that there is a big risk in so many different ways. But when I stand in front of people and have to talk to them about this, it's tough and it can really upset some people. I have to wave my white flag and say I'm a former athlete. I love sports. I am not trying to bring harm. And also just say, like, don't shoot the messenger, because the information that I have to share is very scary, but that's not my intent to scare people. I just want them to have more options. And so I will explain to them the risks. I will explain that it's not just a concussion. People hear concussion either from coaches or teammates or people that are on the force, their brothers in blue, and they hear the concussion piece and they think, well, it's not that big of a deal. And unfortunately, it very much is, because the body does remember the score. And so the number of concussions that you have over a period of time can really add up. And so having 3, 4, 5, 6 concussions can really increase your risk for death. It can increase your risk for having a completely different life. And unfortunately, especially in young people now, we're finding that brain injuries and concussions are more detrimental to them because if you think about young athletes, they don't have the adult musculature and structures that we do. And so if you are adding weight, like a helmet, like a guardian cap, which I know that those are in the sports realm pretty heavy right now, that adds weight to an already pediatric body. And so that's actually increasing the damage that can be done. And so when that happens, we also have to think about the kiddos who are in school and how they're showing up with likely misdiagnosis. So there are people who show up, young people that show up like they have ADHD or like they have ODD, obstinance defiance disorder, or some other behavioral issue, but people aren't asking, has your child ever had a concussion? Has there ever been a brain injury, for a doctor to potentially diagnose them as having X, Y, and Z? And a lot of medical schools in America and in Canada don't have curriculum that is specific to concussion. So a lot of times people who don't go to doctors who are experts in brain injury or concussion, even there are neurologists who are not experts in concussion and can misdiagnose or miss some things. And, medical school, there's a lot to cover, so I completely understand, but I would love to allow people to know to even ask these questions. There have been people who are in meetings with children, and the speech therapist can ask, has your child ever had a history of a brain injury? And I know for a fact this one answer was, no, they've never had a brain injury. And the mom took a moment to think, and she said, well, there was that time that the TV fell on his head. So there could be a direct correlation. And so you think about that with, I believe this officer he played football. He also had a military background. And so you can see that a lot with military personnel. They're a higher risk for CTE because of the blast that they sustain and the different trauma that happens to the brain. And if you think about, this is my favorite analogy, using an egg and a helmet, because a lot of people think, well, military, they get helmets, athletes, they get helmets, but helmets are designed to protect or prevent skull fracture, not from preventing concussion or brain injury. So if you think about an egg, the raw egg, there's a yolk on the inside, and just like our brain, it's not attached or fixed to the skull. So the shell is not fixed to the yolk. But if you take the egg yolk or the egg and you shake it, is that yolk on the inside shaking? Yes, of course it is, yes. Just like the brain on the inside of the skull. So if I were to take that raw egg and I was to wrap it in 100 feet of bubble wrap, and if I tossed it to you or anybody else, if you caught it or dropped it, is the yolk still going to shake?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And so there's a false sense of security around helmets and around guardian caps that make athletes, their parents, the coaches, referees, fans, everybody feel like there's a safety that is not as high as they would like to think that it is.
Yeah.
And so we also have to consider that on the inside of that eggshell, it's also smooth. The interior of our skull is actually very jagged and sharp. So when you do take a hit, and the human brain can get concussed between 50 and, I want to say 120 G's of force. To get whiplash, you only need 4 G's of force. So there are professionals that need to be included on all of these kinds of teams that don't get mentioned, like speech therapists, like chiropractors, because if you're getting whiplash at 4 G's, that means that the nerves that go from your brain to the rest of your body are now getting pinched or misaligned. And so even from seeing a chiropractor, seeing a medical speech science pathologist, and or seeing a neurooptometrist, because a lot of things happen with athletes, police officers, military personnel with their vision, and they're not even aware of it. So even the way that they track, can their eyes track at the same time? Is one eye tracking and the other one is kind of jumping and having a harder time? That's going to make it harder for police officers to do their job. It's going to make it dangerous for them to drive. Same thing with athletes. It's going to be difficult for them to carry out what they have to. Can they catch? Can they run? Can they see straight? And so when those things are shoved down, because we do live in a society where it's a get tough, don't say anything, just deal with it kind of energy, then you have people who are putting their lives, their teammates, their brothers in blue, and a lot of other people at risk because of the hush, don't say anything, and just deal with it kind of mentality.
I think about my short-lived football career in high school and middle school, and a couple of things that stick out as you were saying that. You're just seeing stars, or you get your bell rung, or make sure you have a mouthpiece in, because that's going to prevent a concussion. That was the conversation. That was literally the conversation.
Still being had.
Yeah, and this was 16, 17 years ago.
They're still saying these same untrue things.
Wow.
Yes. And the same stay in the dark for weeks, just don't do anything, stay off your devices. And now we're learning that advice can actually be counterproductive and can cause more harm than good. But that's still being advised to athletes and anybody else who's sustained a concussion. The number one cause for concussion are falls.
Really?
And so people get concussed and they may or may not go to the hospital, just like you said. It's a concussion. I got my bell rung. I saw stars. Those are all concussions, but because they're said in that whimsical kind of cutesy way, it's not taken as seriously. So when you have someone like this officer that we're talking about, Officer Simpson, He very well could have sustained multiple concussions playing football. He could have sustained multiple concussions in the military, definitely in the line of duty of being a police officer. But as I tell the people in my audience, it's not always, you're not always getting a sterile brain to begin with. If you're looking at someone who's playing sports at a very young age, it could be someone who's subjected to domestic violence, to child abuse, or it could be somebody who just had fun playing on the playground and they got concussed, two or three times as a kid. And one, they don't know to say, I have had a concussion, or I've had one too many bells that have been rung and I need some support to help. So it'll come out as, this child is bad, or this child needs a diagnosis, or this child needs medication. And so you could be medicating a child that doesn't need to be medicated. They could be seeing a speech therapist or another specialist who can help them with their behaviors and help to rehab what has been damaged.
Wow. What are the conversations like for caregivers, for family members at the point of diagnosis of CTE? Because one, it's coming to grips with the diagnosis, and then two, it's what's next? So what is that conversation like?
It's a very scary conversation. Yeah. It's not a fun conversation. While I haven't been in the room for a CTE conversation, I have spoken to people who have been in them. The one I'm thinking about is someone who was an NFL player, and the depression that comes afterwards, because to be a football player, especially in this country, as I talked about, there is a lot of praise and you're famous, you're a star, you're important. And then when you have to protect yourself, your brain, for yourself, for your family, for your future, there can be feeling bad about yourself. There's depression, and that's where a lot of thoughts of suicide or actual acts of suicide take place. September 10th is Suicide Prevention Day. And so there's a lot of information that's being shared regarding that. But it is a very tough position to be in, because when you are in these positions that can result in CTE, a lot of that is your identity. So if you're a military member and that's been your career, a lot of the questions are, who am I if I'm not fill in the blank? A police officer, an athlete, a military member. And so there are services and wonderful organizations that are being developed now that they're seeing what a big issue this is, to help people find ways after whatever it is that they are done with it. So whether that's an athlete or a military person, someone who is in law enforcement, just learning that there are ways after whatever your route is, and that there is life after it. Because a lot of times when we're dealing with CTE, it is at the point where it's a life or death situation. If you have watched the Aaron Hernandez special on FX, now when I talk to people about this, I encourage them to, one, go back and watch the docuseries and see if you can tell where the CTE spells are. They use the camera equipment to show when he's in a spell, because the camera gets a little fuzzy and the movement, it's kind of like he's in a haze or a daze. And so I encourage that, and I also encourage people to watch League of Denial, which is a free documentary on PBS, which talks about the really awareness. Awareness of CTE in the athletic realm.
And the Boston Globe does did a great podcast before the Aaron Hernandez sort of series on FX. I think Netflix did one as well.
Yes.
But the Boston Globe, it came from the Boston Globe. They did really good. I know it's just a podcast, you can't watch it, but they really sort of spell out what you're talking about right now. I do want to talk about your nonprofit and talk about the work you're doing. Because I've seen some of the clips, I've seen some of the pictures. I mean, you're really in front of an audience, and you're busy with in itself with the work you do. But why did you want to start a nonprofit, and why did you want to add more to your plate?
Well, I was voluntold to start a podcast, and it is Brain Talk Foundation. And I also have a podcast. It's called Candid Conversations with Dr. Kelli, where I'll talk with athletes, professional athletes, as well as parents and coaches, people who are within the realm, as well as military personnel, veterans, people who have been diagnosed with suspected CTE, and really just keep the conversation going. But Brain Talk Foundation was started out of oh my gosh, I can't believe people don't know this kind of conversation. So I was invited to be a keynote at South Carolina State Convention, SCISHA. And one of the talks that I did was on concussion, traumatic brain injury, and CTE in athletes and the SLP's role, speech language pathologist, because that's what I am. And I was speaking with my colleagues, and I had this whole 90-minute presentation, and afterwards, there was such a long line of SLPs who were asking me, like, I think my son might be showing signs, I think my husband, or even themselves, and they were asking all of these questions, and I was thinking, like, if my colleagues don't know this, what are the chances that my neighbors know this, or that the people I go to church with know this, or the people that I'm, grocery shopping with? Chances are that they don't. And as I said, I'm a former athlete, so I know the benefit and the beauty of being on a team, or, just the responsibility that comes with it, the camaraderie, and so many people can look at athletics and have positive things to say. But I wanted people to no longer have to say, I wish I would have known.
Right.
And so to hear those heartbreaking stories of, a mother whose son died by suicide, or a dad who was on the sidelines and saw his kid change forever because he was body slammed on his head and lost 39 points on his IQ. Those are people that I've interviewed on my podcast. Wow. And to hear those stories, I am just doing my very best through the nonprofit to get in front of as many audiences as I can to share this message so that people can actually know, and I can raise the awareness, because while I may not want to stop everyone from playing a sport that they love, I don't want to stop people, but I want them to know that there are options. I interviewed Emmanuel Acho on my podcast, and he had a completely different plan than get to the NFL and just be a lifer. He had a great plan of have 3 years and then have an agent who gets you a really good contract, and then you can be out in 3 years, but you still get your full benefits. You still are able to be a successful broadcaster, and he still has, his faculties about him. So There are other ways, and I would just like for people to know you can have your cake and you can eat it too, but you can do it in a responsible way where you're going to have your brain at the end of it.
You can do what you love. I'm thinking of my nephew who plays football in South Carolina, and so he's always talking about playing at the college level. He's in high school now, so it's great information for guys like him, for parents, and so much great. I feel like I learned so much in this interview. Before I let you go, you've been so generous with your time. Where can folks find you? Because they're going to look at this interview and they're going to, all right, they're going to be doing their Googles. Where can they find you?
They can find me on social media, on all platforms. I am at Dr. Kelli Brain Talk SLP. That's DRKELLI Brain Talk SLP. And they can also go to the website, which is braintalkfoundation.org. And from there, you'll be able to reach out if you're interested in contacting me to come and speak at any of your venues.
We have to have you come back on the show, Dr. Kelli.
Absolutely.
This is only the first time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for stopping by Live Impact News.